What's going on, guys? Wedge and Zack. No, it's not clickbait. In an Obi-Wan Kenobi way of looking at things, these two share a love of sorts that can burn away the darkness of fear and rage. You have been warned. There once was a dream called Final Fantasy VII. Has 23 years been used as a plaything of the moment? People surviving past the relative moment in time we presume them dead has sent shivers of far-reaching emotion through the cosmos of the fandoms. The resurrection of Cloud with black hair, bigger muscles, and smiles more is a tug of heartstrings war synonymous with the greater question at large about love, hate, inspiration, betrayal, insanity, and genius. For so many, thine only hate sprung from thine former love. If only our deceased heroes, to be or not to be, was a question less inseparable from our decades-long dream, from our most enrapturing and ideals, then the impact of these survivals could be judged on how they felt in the moment. Yet what makes our dreams and our ideals, our very reality, real, are the parts that we do find inseparable. This violent dichotomy is enough to drive anyone. Were the slings and arrows of outrageous time-space only but an entry wound? Has it been 23 years for naught? Was a PS3 demo a forbidden kiss that never should have landed? Is everything sacred, the sweetness of passion's promise, now being sold to lustful's whim's short horizon? Was the terrifying eruption of reaction a mistress of the night? Were those tears of terrible loss honored? Does grief of thine own lie heavy in thy breast? Was time travel a curvaceous body to be ravaged at whim, or was too early seen unknown and known too late pure genius? Are the fledgling feelings that grabbed us so deeply on a path leading somewhere with a throbbing pulse? Is all this science mumbo-jumbo convolution a magnificent tapestry adorning the majestic ceiling of our imagination? What is going on inside us now? Was it okay to be overcome with shock when Zack appeared on screen? Is it perplexing that breaths quicken at the thought of once deceased lovers yet loving, and once dead heroes yet braver? In the extremes of polar response, our hearts did cry, with feelings no one could hide. Many truly feel hollow now, and many wept when hollow sounded the end of the first leg of our magical journey. How much of the peaks of ecstasy and loving ravishment and the depths of loss and sadness that you experienced was real? Only you get to decide. Only you get to answer. How much of what you responded to was a part of you? Only you get to know how you felt when Zack Fair graced our experience once more. Only you get to choose if his resurrection and that of others is rabid abomination or ribald apotheosis or anywhere in between. At this moment, deciding the logistics of feeling for many is akin to discovering the grand theory of everything. From this vantage point, one game deep into the saga of unknown length, we who fell in love with the remake cannot draw the entire picture without guessing. We are left to solve smaller questions, guided by our emotions and life experiences, to cheerfully try and paint a smaller section of the universal map. Zack Fair's charismatic, confident countenance erupting on screen asks a strong question that runs parallel to the overarching emotional enigma surrounding the remake idea. Why? That is the question for Zack Fair. And why is the ultimate question for many, for much of where emotionally that we have been brought to. The Whispers, the Harbinger, Sephiroth's arrival so early in the saga, people surviving past when we believed they'd left us. More so than even how any of this came about. Everything returns to the sacred question of why. Understanding why Zack Fair was included, perhaps will paint the part of the map that has the cardinal directions written upon it. So we lovers of our heroes, old and new, can at least know which way is up. However, this depth of knowingness is a prehistoric sinkhole of unknown fathoms, where a cross-current of how can make or break us, and large shadowy shapes of our own biases skirt ominously in and out of sight. As with every cave dive, bring too much oxygen and let your childlike sense of wonder explode. This question, this quest, begin with our plucky zero to hero, Wedge. Our feline-loving, friendly adventurer Wedge only wants to make a difference. It is his singular, driving need. In the remake experience, Wedge did impact his family in Avalanche in many priceless ways, but that's not what he's looking for. The goal of his imagined treasury is being a hero, having a meteoric impact, saving the day, taking down the bad guys, and most importantly, preventing his family from being hurt. Was then Wedge's cruel twist of irony to die by fading to black when his brother and sister got heart-wrenching death scenes? I feel not. Then perhaps one day soon, when controllers again are gathered in excited hands, and we imagination adventurers leap into the majesty of the remake universe, we will witness a Wedge no one would want to trifle with. Until then, our hero Wedge can sit and laugh and eat pizza, knowing he tipped over the phenomenally effectual domino through his unflinching heroism and diametric love for his family. Wedge called in Avalanche control to attack Shinra Tower, despite still suffering grievously from his wounds. As will be explored next video, this domino tipping is unique, borderline impossible, when put into the context of Wedge doing this against the wishes of the demigod-like, whispery continuum. Avalanche Control did not attack Shinra Tower in the original game. The Whispers do not play nice when anyone goes against their intentions. They are willing to murder to enforce their agenda of following the events of the original game. Yet Wedge managed to slip by and tip over this massive block of causality. Once this domino fell, sending out butterfly ripples into our hero's story, there was no turning back, even for the mighty Whispers. After Wedge called in Shinra Control and himself wound up next to the mayor of Midgar, our heroes then almost escaped by rooftop, which allowed them to save President Shinra and then witness the genocidal bastard be impaled on Misurami, amongst other space-time alterations. In addition to these veritable differences, explosions were sounded, and a plethora of other reality-shifting events unfolded for everyone in that tower. That series of dominoes fell. The Whispers were capable of saving Barrett from death without much effort. Yet, by the time the Whispers witnessed the ripples being cast out from all of those pebbles and rocks hitting the pond of reality, it was too late. They could not just course correct the problem through direct action. Of course, Sephiroth messing with the story had an immense part to play in all this. After those blocks irreversibly toppled, in an act of sheer desperation, the Whispers bubbled the space-time around Shinra Tower, and then all of Midgar. This literal bubbling of space-time transcended the trappings of 4D reality, as it simultaneously bubbled the space-time of a Midgar that stood before a heart-wrenching specter from the past. That monumental timeline bridge, that domino, was one that could not be undone by the Whispers, nor even by their destruction, as discussed in previous videos. When the continuum of the Harbinger was destroyed, all of it was unmade. Every interference, every course correction, every time the Whispers screwed with our hero's journey and beyond was unmade. This 5 to 6D bubble could not just be undone, it seems. It isn't just an event that forked in one direction due to the Whispers. It is a literal, visceral containment of time-space that bridged two different timeline universes. When the Harbinger ended, the 5 to 6D bubble ended, and the Midgar it so bubbled, formerly two Midgars, was what remained. A massive release of energy exploded into life, and the chasm of infinity was rendered transversable. On Midgar, two timelines converged. This reality-bending domino fell much in part because of a much smaller, seemingly innocent one that was knocked over by one person's selfless bravery and love. That hero only ever wanted to make a difference. There is one final block in that chain that is currently in the process of falling, one that allowed our hearts to sing and jaws to drop. Younger, significantly less scarred Cloud and Zack Fair, they still live. That dominoes fall and chains of them have beginnings is no surprise. That the effectual trajectory of these dominoes give a big-hearted hero potent significance is touchingly beautiful. And what of Zack Fair and younger Cloud 2 as I refer to him? There to be or not to be is the pressing quandary for lovers of the remake and those less in love alike. How much of this dynamic duo's heartwarming but unknowing tempest at the end of the causality conga line is the raw, unchained necessity of a story that's rational and intuitive? Could his inclusion act as the stalwart, unflinching buttress to hold up so much of the magic and the belief that we imagination adventurers sail upon? To dive deeper into this sinkhole, let us focus on the query at hand. Details. The delectable deliciousness of diabolical details disturbs from the dopaminergic, a deliverance of dreamy divinity. How much of the details are sublime E=mc² clues, and how much of it artistic expression, or even mistakes? All of you have the ability to decide for yourselves. Details, often called clues, come to life with a magnifying glass and the right questions. The remake's version of Zack's Last Stand has suggestive evidence that it was in an alternate timeline. Does this have anything substantive to be birthed from? Rephrased, could the Crisis Core timeline be an alternate one all along? It does not need to be, and let it not be if that is your dream. But as Zack's death sequence in the original game and that in Crisis Core are considerably different, the two games can then be shown to be alternate timelines to each other, even if 99% of Crisis Core also happened in the 97 game. Next, why in the remake are we shown the ending of Crisis Core nearly pixel for pixel, line for line? Square Enix could have chosen to show this scene in a multitude of ways, from the original game sequence with better graphics, or something entirely new, or Crisis Core's sequence with thematic and artistic changes. Square Enix instead revealed the ending of Crisis Core nearly identically, a choice bearing within itself a meteoric layered meaning. A layered meaning. An exotic narrative tool in line with everything else in the remake, from the musical indicators to the breadcrumb trail of clues to the game's title itself. Remake. We are shown the ending of Crisis Core so exactly, it leaves no room for guessing as to what we are being shown. Except now, there are whispers clearly flying about. And not just in the background is that ginormous bubble, but interwoven into the fabric of Zack's epic Last Stand itself. These cutscenes in the remake were the ending of Crisis Core. These ephemeral murderous bastards that are prominently flying about in this scene, even though Zack cannot see them, could be in the ending of Crisis Core. We just could not see them. Next, why would the whispers even be in the remake's version of the tragic Last Stand of Zack Fair? A key point to understanding this will be explored in a future video. The whispers are fixated on ensuring the events of 1997. In the original game that transforms so many of our lives, we are shown how Cloud's best friend came to his unfortunate end at the hands of the Shinra dogs. In Crisis Core, the ending substantially diverged from this, though ultimately its outcome wound up being the same. This divergent course correction pairing is eerily similar to the Whisper's interference pattern that we have learned to recognize in our beloved remake. From the magical ride of the remake experience, we know that the Whispers only show up when a deviation has transpired, and this deviation is an effectual one relevant to what the Whispers care about. Consider our difference maker Wedge once more. The Whispers ignored him entirely, and even went so far to alter his experience from the original game to suit their purposes, until he was a problem for what the Whispers do care about. Then they murdered him, and these Whispers were all about Zack's Last Stand. These choices by Square Enix of showing the end of Crisis Core nearly identically and infusing Whispers into the scene are being shown to suggest to our inner child's edge of creations that the ending of Crisis Core was a deviation and resultant Whisper course correction. Zack and Cloud 2 had strayed from the events of the original game, that which the Harbinger had intended for them, and thus that heart-wrenching ending unfolded. The Whispers murdered our Zack in the Crisis Core timeline. When you hear Zack scream at the end of Crisis Core, see the bloody hands of the Whispers. Though the full ramifications of Zack and younger Cloud being with us once more won't be revealed for years, Having a knowingness that Zack's death sequence in Crisis Core is a deviation brings the sweetness of a summer's breeze to the hot emotions running rampant since we first witnessed his return. The oxygen of reason is available to the lungs of the Remake universe, but this is only half the magic of Zack Fair's return. Square Enix used the very timing of Zack's scenes as a divine Rosetta Stone to allow us a dive light for which to swim deeper into the great and often apocryphal currents we find ourselves in post-remake. The relative times of each scene revealed in the remake are spirit-gripping artistic, yet they are also of an inch-long equation sublime specificity. We Imagination adventurers are being given many details, if only we brought enough oxygen to keep diving. All three versions of Zack's Last Stand, Crisis Core, the original game, and the remake, have the atmospheric phenomena of a storm as a uniting narrative element, and timestamp. In the first remake scene, the sun is high in the sky, there are almost no shadows not cast from overhangs, and there are very few clouds. This lines up exactly with the first Crisis Core scene, except in the Crisis Core scene there are noticeably more soldiers, and an extremely important detail. And notice when this scene in the remake occurs relative to our heroes in their timeline, only after the Whispers have created the bubble bridge that transcends space and time. In the second remake scene, the sun has only moved a bit, now listing towards Midgar but still high in the sky, with only slightly more clouds now evident. A few hours have passed, at most. This scene contains the golden orb explosion, as well as the unique chip bag. Yet, in the second Crisis Core scene, it's full cloud cover. The storm is about to open. Mist has begun to descend upon Midgar, but it has not yet begun to rain. This tragic scene takes place at a relative time significantly later than the golden orb explosion scene, as if all those extra soldiers required more time to take out. In the original game's death sequence, there is full cloud cover, and it begins to rain only as the three murderous soldiers leave, placing it at a relative time later than the second scenes in Crisis Core and Remake. In Crisis Core's third scene, that still makes me tear up, it's raining heavily now. There are puddles of water and blood on the ground, full cloud cover, and storm. What a brutal scene. Phasing later into this scene, the storm is now broken. Mist is all about Midgar, the clouds are parting, and the sun is setting. And in the final remake scene, the storm has also broken for Zack. The rain has stopped, the clouds are parting, and the sun is setting. Zack and younger Cloud still live. In the final scene of the remake experience, as our heroes walk into the gathering storm, Zack and an almost dead Cloud 2 walk out of it. A remarkable thematic tool, as spine-tinglingly haunting as it is enchanting, presaging of what's to come for both parties. Zack and Cloud 2 so walk from dark to light at a moment in relative time after both death sequences in the original game and Crisis Core had transpired. Zack and Cloud live. Considering this layout of relative times combined with other details, we can see the Eureka E=MC² beauty of how these cutscene dominoes fell. This craftily and beautifully executed series of cutscenes produce a hyperbolic ether for the bliss of our subconsciousness to dance in. Even if we'd not pieced it together consciously yet, our inner childs knew. They felt it as they walked this distant world where all was theirs to take in. Zack living past when we originally thought he had, in itself is momentous and extreme in its emotional rigor, sending millions of jaws dropped to their slackened state. Now, in another timeline, Zack and younger, less traumatized Cloud live on, to breathe and smile and ache and take down monsters, and be heroic, until they meet their end on their terms, not on the whims of the clumsy, murderous Whispers. What makes our irises helplessly dilate, though, with the help of Wedge's selfless actions, a space-time bridge called Midgar now exists. Our two bedraggled, mostly dead heroes from Crisis Core will be joining our beloved adventurers in their timeline. The two groups may never meet, but together, even a continuum-consuming Genova insane Sephiroth will be defeated, perhaps once and for all. "There ain't no getting off this train we're on," a gun-arm-toting father said, and this train, wherever it goes, owes a large part of its beginning to a plucky hero now synonymous with making a difference. April 2020, for many, was waking up again in 1997 and having our foundations shaken once more. For others, it was finding themselves in this utterly inimitable feeling space for the first time. And for some, it was incurable electric heartache. For all of us, as we partook in our beloved hero's journey, we began to ask, what are these bizarre, pervasive, insanely persuasive, often virgin sensations inside us that we just could not control? Ultimately, the grand and meaningful why of Zack Fair's return, of the remake, of the infinite sea of your inner landscapes, is up to you. There once was a dream called Final Fantasy VII. It changed a generation, my generation. It gave birth to millions of worlds of imagination. Very rarely has anything garnered so much devotion and tender loving conflagration. 23 years later, as controllers were picked up, new players and veteran players alike allowed themselves a smile at the iconic play screen. We took our last steps from the precipice of the familiar and dove through a surreal sinkhole together. So very many of us came away with paradigm-shifting wonderment and wordless emotion, asking how much of what we just experienced, how much of what we remembered, was just a game, just a dream, our dream. Love, hate, inspiration, betrayal, insanity, genius, more than 2 decades of believing, waiting, dreaming, all those palpitations of the heart, the tears of sorrow and joy. Is any of it real?